Hey, Motorman here. And a couple of days ago, I had a private lesson, and something very unusual. It's maybe happened 3 times in the past 26 years. But, they say riding a motorcycle is 90% mental, 10% physical, and I believe that is the case. The physical part, 3 techniques: proper use of your head and eyes, proper use of the friction zone, a little pressure on the rear brake for low speed stuff, and that's really about it. But 90% of it is in your head. So once you know what these techniques are and you know how to use them, you should continue to get better and better. And that's usually the case. Now, I had a student who was doing pretty good, went through the first 2 exercises, the slow cone weave and the 27-foot U-turn, went to the offset cone weave, did okay. Then we'd go to the intersection where most people, we call it their light comes on, they really start getting good with the techniques. Well, this rider goes through the intersection a couple of times, does okay, not great, he's about average. And instead of getting better, he suddenly starts getting worse and worse. Now, this isn't an old guy. He was maybe around 50 years old and in good physical condition, and I just couldn't figure it out. I did everything I know how to do. I put him on the back of his own bike, rode him through the exercise so he could see what it should feel like. I put him on a smaller bike, on a Sportster, because he was on an Ultra, and sometimes putting people on a smaller bike helps. This did the opposite. He was worse on the smaller bike, but he completely psyched himself out for no apparent reason. So after about 2 hours, we had to stop because it was clear he was getting worse and worse and dropping his bike, 3 or 4 times. But I'm going to show this to you because if this happens to you, you might recognize these same, what should I call it, maybe symptoms. So take a look. So here we have the rider going through the first exercise. This is about 30 minutes of practice on this particular exercise, and he's not perfect, but he's about average. Sometimes a little too much throttle, not enough brake, maybe too much speed in the U-turn, but about average. Here's exercise 2, the offset cone weave. It's a series of quick left turns and right turns, and he's doing very well, actually better than average in this exercise. His throttle is still occasionally too high, and then he'll let it drop to idle, but that's pretty common when you're getting used to these exercises. But he's looking pretty good. Leaning the bike, doesn't have any fear of leaning the motorcycle, that's for sure. And then we're going to move on to the intersection. Now, the first time through the intersection, he knows exactly where to go, and he's being a little tentative, on and off the throttle, on and off the brake, instead of keeping steady power to the rear wheel and steady light pressure on the rear brake. He's on and off, so he's making mistakes, but that's kind of common. Generally, after 6 or 7 times through, riders get better and better until they can actually do it without even thinking about it. But that's not the case with this rider. He's kind of mad at himself because he thought he should be doing much better than he is, and I'll show you what happens. Here he's doing okay. He gets into this turn. He releases power, sucks in the clutch, and down goes the motorcycle. And this was the start of real frustration. So after the first drop, he goes back into the intersection. He's revving the motor way too high, barely touching the rear brake. Pulls in the clutch, and down goes the motorcycle. He's really getting frustrated now. I like to do this with the throttle. It lets me ride more aggressively, but it's just a personal preference. Stay straight up. Lean forward towards me. His next try through the intersection, after me riding him through it, unfortunately it didn't help. It works about half the time. But again, he pulls in the clutch, down goes the motorcycle. Pulled in the clutch. I figured we'd give it just one more try. He comes in the intersection. Now he needs to go to that green tipped cone. He misses it by 8 or 9 feet, looks straight ahead, and right off the exercise into the grass he goes. Next, I try putting him on the Sportster, but he gets on that bike, and for some reason he's got the clutch fully engaged, and he's going too fast to make the turns. I allow him to come back and try it one more time. Now keep in mind, I've already had him go back with his own bike through the very first exercise, which he now is not able to do, even though 2 hours prior to this, he was doing pretty well in that. But he has psyched himself out. He's convinced himself that he can't do this, and it's at the point where we really need to stop. That's the best thing. If you ever find yourself training or practicing the techniques and you get to the point like this where you can't do anything right, it's time to stop for the day. Do it another day. Come back 2 or 3 days later, 2 or 3 weeks later. What difference does it make? You got all the time in the world. You've been doing it wrong for 20 years. It's time to learn to do it right, but it may take more time than you think it should. Don't let that bother you. I explained to this rider that if he does this all on a bicycle, he probably get the feel for it a little bit better, and he'll have no fear of leaning or dropping the bicycle. I gave him a practice guide so he could set up the exercises on his own. I explained to him that make everything bigger. Make it as big as you want until you get it down perfectly, and then little by little shrink the exercises down to the proper size. So please subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something by it. And don't forget, I do 2 videos a week. I've got 1,500 other videos on YouTube for you to watch.